The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. Words to know. Mock, to tease or make fun of. That girl is mocking me. Whippoorwill, a type of bird.
Hello! Thanks for joining me again today. Today we're going to read another 2 chapters in the Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. And oh, I hope these chapters are a little happier than the last one. Edward got thrown out of the train car, rolled down a hill, and now he's all alone again without Bull or Lucy to keep him company. Let's find out what happens next. Here we go. Chapter 15. In the morning, the sun rose, and the cricket song gave way to a bird song, and an old woman came walking down the dirt road and tripped right over Edward. "Huh," she said. She pushed at Edward with her fishing pole. "Oh, looks like a rabbit," she said. She put down her basket and bent down and stared at Edward. "Only this one ain't real." She stood back up. "Huh," she said again. She rubbed her back. "Well, what I say is there's a use for everything, and everything has its use. That's what I say." Edward didn't care what she said. The terrible ache that he had felt the night before had gone away and had been replaced with a different feeling, one of hollowness and despair. "Pick me up or don't pick me up," the rabbit was thinking. "It makes no difference to me." The old lady picked him up. She bent him in half and put him in her basket that smelled like weeds and fish, and then she kept walking, swinging the basket and singing, "Nobody knows the troubles I've seen." Edward, in spite of himself, was listening. "I've seen troubles too," he thought. "You bet I have. And apparently my troubles aren't over yet." Edward was right. His troubles were not over. The old woman found a use for him. She hung him from a pole in her vegetable garden. She nailed his velvet ears to the wooden pole and spread his arms out as if he was flying and attached his paws to the pole by wrapping pieces of wire around them. In addition to Edward, pie tins hung from the pole. They clinked and clanked and shone in the morning sun. "Ain't a doubt in my mind that you could scare them off," the old lady said. Scare who off? Edward wondered. Birds, he soon discovered. Crows. They came flying at him, cawing and screeching and wheeling over his head and diving at his ears. "Go on now, Clyde," said the woman. She clapped her hands. "You gotta act ferocious." Clyde! Edward felt tired. He was so tired. He thought he might actually be able to sigh out loud. Would the world never stop calling him by the wrong name? The old woman clapped her hands again. "Get to work, Clyde," she said. "Scare them birds off." And then she walked away from him and out of the garden and toward her small house. The birds never stopped. They flew around his head. They tugged at the loose threads on his sweater. One large crow in particular would not leave the rabbit alone. He was perched on the pole and screaming a dark message into Edward's left ear. "Caw! Caw! Caw!" without stopping. As the sun rose higher and shone meaner and brighter, Edward became somewhat dazed. He mistook that large crow for Pellegrina. "Go ahead," he thought. "Turn me into a warthog if you want. I don't care. I'm done caring." "Caw! Caw!" said the Pellegrina crow. Finally the sun set and the birds flew away. Edward, hung by his velvet ears, looked up at the night sky. He saw the stars, but for the first time in his life he looked at them and he did not feel comfort. Instead he felt made fun of. "You are down there alone," the stars seemed to say to him. "And we are up here in our constellations all together." "I have been loved," Edward told the stars. "So?" said the stars. "What difference does that make? You are all alone now." Edward could think of no answer to that question. Eventually the sky lightened and the stars disappeared one by one. The birds returned and the old woman came back to the garden. This time she brought a young boy with her. Chapter 16. Bryce, said the old woman, you get away from that rabbit. I ain't paying you to stand there and stare. Yes, ma'am, said Bryce. He wiped his nose on the back of his hand and continued to look up at Edward. The boy's eyes were brown with little flecks of gold shining in them. Hey, he whispered to Edward. A crow settled on Edward's head, and the boy flapped his arms and shouted, You go on now, kid! And the bird spread his wings and flew away. Bryce! Shouted the old woman. Ma'am? Said Bryce. You get away from that rabbit and do your work, and I ain't gonna say it again. Yes'm, said Bryce. He wiped his hand across his nose. I'll be back to get you, he whispered. The rabbit spent the day hanging by his ears, baking in the hot sun, watching the old woman and Bryce weed and hoe the garden. Whenever the woman wasn't looking, Bryce would raise his hand and wave at Edward. The bird circled over Edward's head, laughing at him. What was it like to have wings? Edward wondered. If he had wings when he had been tossed overboard, he may not have sunk to the bottom of the sea. Instead, he would have flown in the opposite direction, up into the deep, bright blue sky. And when Lolly took him to the dump, he would have flown out of that garbage and followed her and landed on her head, holding on with sharp claws. And on the train, when the men kicked him, Edward would not have fallen to the ground. Instead, he would have risen up and sat on top of the train and laughed at that man. Caw! 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 In the late afternoon, Bryce and the old lady left the field. Bryce winked at Edward as he walked past him. One of the crows was on Edward's shoulder and tapped his beak at Edward's china face. It reminded the rabbit with each tap that he did not have wings. Not only could he not fly, he could not move on his own at all, in any way. Dusk fell over the field, and then came true dark. A whippoorwill sang out over and over again, Whip-poor-will, whip-poor-will. It was the saddest sound Edward had ever heard. And then came another song, the hum of a harmonica. Bryce stepped out of the shadows. Hey, he whispered at Edward. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand and then played another little bit of a song on the harmonica. I bet you didn't think I'd come back for you, but here I am. I came to save you. Too late, thought Edward as Bryce climbed the pole and worked at the wires that were tied around his wrists. I am nothing. I'm just a hollow rabbit. Too late, thought Edward as Bryce pulled the nails out of his ears. I'm just a doll made out of china. But when the last nail was out and he fell forward right into Bryce's arms, the rabbit felt a rush of relief. And the feeling of relief was followed by joy. Perhaps, he thought, perhaps it is not too late after all for me to be saved. And that's the end of chapter 16. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about this. I have noticed that Pellegrina keeps coming up. Edward keeps thinking about her. Even though if we look at kind of how much time has passed in this book, it's been at least 10 years of Edward's life since he has seen Pellegrina. Why does he keep thinking about her? Why does she keep coming up in his thoughts? And that story she told. It just keeps reoccurring. I'm wondering what you think about that. I have some ideas, but please think about it. Why would he keep thinking about her in that story? Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for listening. Oh, I can't wait to see what happens tomorrow with this little boy and what he does with Edward. I hope you have a good day. See you later. Bye-bye.